Good evening, everyone. And for those joining in elsewhere in the world, good morning, good afternoon. It's really lovely to have you all with us here today for another SciFest webinar. We have been having a series of webinars over the months and will continue to do so. So keep on checking in on the SciFest Africa website to see what's next. Tonight, we have a panel joining us to discuss the creativity in the arts and the sciences. And we have some panelists from South Africa. We have a special guest from abroad and perspectives from the continent. What we'll do this evening is we'll first start with Professor Mike Brewson. He will give us a short presentation and then we'll move on to a conversation. As you're listening in, if you have questions, really welcome you to share them with us. And when we get towards the panel discussion part, then I will pull some out and we'll throw them about and chat. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you will see that there's the option for Q&A. That is the place for you to pop in your questions, and I'll try to keep an eye on them. We're also currently live on Facebook, on the SciFest Africa Facebook site. So please also feel free to type in questions there and share and post as you go. So let's move over to Professor Mike Brewson. He was born and educated in South Africa. He obtained his PhD from Rhodes University. He initially followed a career in marine biology, but over the past 2 decades has focused on science center and museum design and development, the psychology of learning, and the history of Islamic science. I will leave Mike to explain a little bit and introduce his paper. I believe he also has a slideshow for us. So let's get going, and I'll see you after Mike presents and shares with us.
Good evening. Can you see my slides, Rucera?
Yes, it's looking good.
Right. Thank you very much for your welcome, and it's a real pleasure to be part of your panel. Although I'm a scientist, I must say I feel fortunate in that I came from a very artistic family from my hometown in East London. My father was a prominent artist who painted in oils and watercolors and held many successful exhibitions. And my mother was a skilled crafter. And our house was always gloriously full of creative people. And to this day, I have more friends in the arts than in the sciences. When I was director of the Ichthyology Institute, now SAAB, in Makhanda, I aspired to create an optimal environment in which our scientists could reach their full potential. And I decided to compare creativity in the arts and the sciences and learn more about the synergies between them. I realized that art and science have not only the process of trial and error in common, but also the processes of experimenting and creating something new and innovative. I concluded that science and art are much more than bodies of knowledge. They are ways of thinking and finding things out and have a lot in common. This made me realize that the faithful formalist, as a scientist or as an artist, who cautiously toes the line and does not make waves, would not reach novel ideas and make significant discoveries. And I therefore encouraged my researchers to be risk takers who occasionally made mistakes, but always explored and tested big ideas. Artists, including painters, sculptors, musicians, actors, writers, and dancers, use their imagination to create new works that entertain and inspire us. Whereas in the scientists, we do not need to create the objects of our attention as they are already there. To make a scientific discovery is to reveal an existing truth. Scientific facts are therefore revealed and not discovered, and scientists use their imagination to devise novel ways of finding out how things work. Like art, science exists in the domain of the human mind and is driven by restless and curious individuals who are ill at ease with the status quo. As the accomplished American sociobiologist E.O. Wilson once said, in the early stages of creation of both art and science, everything in the mind is a story. I was once accused by a scientific colleague of having a, quote, rather unscientific willingness to dream, unquote. But I took it as a compliment. To me, to be a good scientist, you also need to be a good dreamer and an artist. I would argue that art, including music, transcends cultures, languages, and disciplines, and can convey messages and articulate emotions that are not easily expressed in words. I therefore believe that the arts represent a means by which we can reach millions of humans who choose not to listen to the scientific message, people whom scientists have failed so far to reach. Now, while science can help us to identify and soften our environmental impact, the problem is that it's mainly scientifically orientated people who listen to the voice of science. And this is where art comes in. Art can convey complex and emotional messages to people whether or not they're interested in science. It can help people to change their mindsets, their behavior, and their lifestyles, and to tread more softly on the planet. And perhaps more importantly, it can cause them to become ambassadors for conservation and help to spread the message that we need to make wholesale changes to our lifestyles now. About 40 years ago, when I first visited the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum, I saw space rockets, early aeroplanes, touched a bit of real moon rock. I came away filled with emotion and ambition, but what I remember most from that visit was an art exhibition on the meaning of space exploration and the uniqueness of planet Earth. One painting that I saw portrayed an alligator looking out of the Everglades swamp at a rocket taking off from Cape Canaveral. And it made me wonder what that tiny reptilian brain was thinking. I believe we need new ways of communicating the importance of the scientific message to the public. And to me, art can be one of those agents of change. This idea is, of course, not new. For centuries, artists, especially in Africa, have been using art as a creative tool for change, for resistance, and even rebellion. Recently, the COVID-19 pandemic has encouraged many of them to step out of their comfort zones and address this very pressing issue. In South Africa, at the start of the pandemic, last March, the nation was challenged to submit videos of themselves performing the national anthem. The result was an amazing 1,027-piece virtual choir and orchestra, including people from all walks of life, performing together in a show of true unity. And just as another example of how awareness of coronavirus has been increased, these are some glass and plastic models of the coronavirus produced by the artist Gordon Froude, which are on display at the Art at Africa Gallery in Cape Town. Although the performance of the multinational supergroup, USA and Africa in '85, and the recording of their single, We Are the World, to support famine relief and famine, will probably never be eclipsed, many African artists and writers have performed or produced work that uplifts communities and addresses challenging issues on the continent. And I have time to mention just a few of them. The late Algerian singing star, Hedy, was propelled to worldwide acclaim as one of the originators of a new musical genre, New Kabyle song. He was inspired by the songs that he grew up hearing his grandmother sing and cloaked his songs in Western harmonies, arranged them for guitar and other instruments, collaborated with a poet for the lyrics, and took them to audiences across North Africa and Europe. Hedy's songs gave the Kabyle people a stronger sense of identity and made them realize that their customs and traditions are not backward, but a part of modern Algerian culture. Africa has many traditional dances, from the signature Massey Adamu, the jumping dance performed by young men, to the reel dance, one of the continent's oldest indigenous dance styles, that was originally performed by Khoisan hunter-gatherers around a fire after a successful hunt. Today, the reel is a celebration of ancient traditions that finds new expression in contemporary forms, with distinct Irish and Scottish folk music influences, as well as Dutch folk songs and even American minstrel lyrics. Reel includes movements that imitate the behavior of butterflies, snakes, birds, antelopes, and horses, and employs rapid foot movements that kick up dust, hence its nickname, the stofskoppers. And the famous Brandvleis stofskoppers have performed at SciFest in the past. Increasingly, musicians are using music to peddle their political agendas in a benign way. The Egyptian musician Dina El-Wadidi's journey began when she sang Egyptian folk songs as a member of a Cairo theatre group. When she formed her own band, she melded heritage sounds with influences from jazz, underground rock, and electronic music, and a modern operetta in which she participated captured the mood of the 2011 Arab Spring uprising by encouraging young people to aim high and never lose hope. The Zimbabwean singer and composer of popular African liberation music, Dorothy Masuka, who died in 2019, but her spirit lives on. Her radical Pan-African spirit and upbeat and optimistic songs have been described as a joyous celebration of the winds of change blowing through Africa. Oliver Mtukudzi, Zimbabwe's man of the talking guitar, was a cultural icon, activist, philanthropist, and goodwill ambassador for UNICEF, who is deeply loved for his unique tuku music and songs that confronted the challenges facing African people. For instance, his song, Toady, What Shall We Do, reflects on the devastation caused by HIV/AIDS, and Mabasa Works paints a dire picture of how young people are the first to die, leaving the elderly to fend for themselves. Ugandan pop star Boby Wine has spent his career singing about social injustice and has recently entered politics to capitalize on his popularity. In 2020, he led a star-studded galaxy of African musicians and politicians who composed and performed songs about COVID-19. Wine's track was made with longtime collaborator Nubian Lee and features a fusionist dancehall style that mixes African musical traditions with modern Jamaican rhythms. He also launched a collective call to action, #Don'tGoViral, and invited creatives from all over the world to share their work. Wine argues that in this time of crisis, humanity needs artists and cultural entrepreneurs to bring people together, to activate their collective intelligence and shared humanity, and to translate public health information into language that everyone can understand. He also emphasizes that while it is important to prevent COVID-19 from spreading, it is equally important to prevent misinformation from going viral. The Ugandan musicologist Dominic Makwa conducts research on the impact of pop music on society, including the music of Boby Wine. And he's found that music has created an increased awareness of the HIV/AIDS and COVID-19 pandemics, and that songs can shape popular opinion and also be a mechanism for counseling due to their power of metaphor and their ability to turn despair into hope. Sakari Douglas Camp, the Nigerian-born metal sculptor now based in London, produces evocative works that are inspired by her Kalabari heritage. She was born in Niger, and some of her most famous works were inspired by the struggle of her hometown against rampant pollution caused by the oil industry. South African sculptor Kara Skuman is passionate about biodiversity conservation. She works in Bloemfontein in her father's foundry, and there she melts down the aluminium components of motorcar engines as her revenge against these pollution-belching machines, and casts the liquid aluminium into beautiful artworks and sculptures with evocative names such as Leaflet, and here's another one that I can hold up for you. This one is called Coral Breach, also made from the melted down parts of a motor car. Andries Visser has created this evocative sculpture called Light Touch, using a glass fishing float and carved birchwood hands to promote global conservation, as well as this sculpture called Gasp, carved from the roots of a tree on tree conservation. It reminds me of our theme, Take Root, Nurture. Another artist who displays at the Art at Africa Gallery in Cape Town is David Grissel, and he's produced this work called Are We Lost, using the metaphor of a hermit crab inhabiting a snail's shell and emphasizing that humans do not have another home to go to. Davis Ndugu has become a good friend as a Cape Town craftsman. He collects discarded flip-flop sandals, glues them together into big multicolored blocks, and then carves highly innovative sculptures and animals and other subjects from the blocks. And here he's holding the coelacanth that he made for me. Another South African artist, Ndabuko Ntuli, collects discarded plastic bottle tops and chips of wood and fashions them into elaborate three-dimensional human portraits. And his bottle top portrait of Nelson Mandela, shown here, has brought him international acclaim. Another South African artist, Mhlophe Masibuko of Johannesburg, uses recycled and thrown away objects such as tires, dustbin lids, buckets, and bottle tops to create her artworks that celebrate the agony and ecstasy of everyday life in South African townships and what she calls the beauty of the discarded. And many of her artworks, like this one, are actually framed inside a rubber dustbin lid. Street art has been part of the African scene for many decades. In February 2020, 25 artists from around the world produced over 100 colorful murals as part of an international festival in Salt River, Cape Town, where public art is deeply rooted in the community. The theme of the 2020 festival was digitization, and this is a work by Stefan Smith. He produced a large orange and blue face and commented, "It's amazing, but I just wanted to give a different perspective. Blue represents a digital era, and orange being the warm, familiar, old school vibes. So I wanted to have both these colors shining in the face of my figure so that it shows we're influenced by both the old and the new, and we're not just one-dimensional." Dirk Dennis is co-founded the Art at Africa Gallery on the V&A waterfront in Cape Town, specifically to promote the work of African artists. He argues that art is a form of communication of emotions and ideas to the eyes, the heart, and the mind, and is therefore a form of storytelling that ignites debate and encourages discussion. To him, art has tremendous power to change the world for the better. His gallery, through its art, seeks to address the issues that face modern African society, such as gender inequality, racial discrimination, homophobia, identity, and biodiversity loss. It recognizes that artists are often the first to oppose binary prejudices like racism, and rather see it as an opportunity to portray the kaleidoscopic continuum between extremes. He also believes, as I do, that there's an increasingly strong interface between art and science, especially environmental science. And interestingly, when I attended the 2018 National Arts Festival in Makonda, I counted and found that over half the works on display or performed addressed a scientific topic. The theme of Art at Africa's mid-2020 exhibition was called The Blue Dot, and it reflected on humankind's perspective on planet Earth and refers to the iconic photograph of the planet, the pale blue dot, taken by NASA's Voyager 1 space probe in February 1990 from a distance of 6 billion kilometers away. It was a wonderfully evocative exhibition that really made us think about our place on Earth. Finally, I'd like to mention Nicholas Ellenborg, and shown here on the right, who's been a leading actor, playwright, and producer in South Africa for over 30 years. In addition to producing and acting in over 130 plays, he's made several highly acclaimed films. He founded the Mhlophe Theatre Company and Theatre for Africa, and his plays such as Guardians of the Deep have been performed at Earth summits like the one in Johannesburg, and Guardians of Eden was even performed in Trafalgar Square in London, the first performing art in that iconic venue. More importantly, he and his wife Liz have taken their plays to remote villages throughout Africa and the Indian subcontinent, trained local actors, presented performances in their local languages, and given a voice to the unheard. Theatre for Africa is the most awarded theatre company in South African history. Nicholas has won the Duke of Edinburgh Award the Fleur de Cuff Lifetime Achievement Award, the Herald's Angels, the highest award from the Edinburgh Festival, and the World Bank President's Best Project in Africa. His Raiders of the Lost Art Park has been the best-selling show at 27 of the last National Arts Festivals in Macondo. Theatre for Africa is unashamedly theatre with purpose, and no one can argue that it is not good art. I'll end with a few wrap-up comments. It's clear from this brief overview that Africa has a very dynamic arts and culture scene, and that art in all its forms can be used without losing its value to convey messages to ordinary citizens and also to those in power that the status quo is not good enough. In contrast, science is a relatively austere discipline that is typically inhabited by bright but reclusive characters who could do with the injection of some pizzazz into their efforts to bring their scientific findings to the attention of the broader public. Science makes an enormous contribution to the development of Africa and to the well-being of its people, but to many, it is the continent's best-kept secret. Art and science are both avatars of human creativity, but their distinctive attributes need to be used in complementary ways to address the challenges that face us on the African continent. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike. That was quite a sweeping example of examples of radical arts across the continent, and some really nice visual slides for us to also get into. I'd like to just take this moment to invite our other panelists to join us. If you could turn on your videos, but keep your mics muted for now. And while our panelists join us, let me just give you a brief introduction of who we have with us. We have Heather Massey, who's coming in from New York. Heather is a New York City actor and writer. Originally from Virginia, Heather has always been fascinated by the sciences, especially astronomy. She studied astrophysics at the University of Virginia and theatre arts at the Virginia Tech School for the Arts. Heather has performed extensively in New York City and throughout the USA. She currently tours around the world with her 14-time award-winning, internationally acclaimed solo show, Hedy, The Life and Inventions of Hedy Lamarr. And you can see a fantastic poster there in the background. I also like to welcome Dr. Gcina Mhlophe, who is, of course, no stranger to SciFest. It's an honor to have you here with us again. Dr. Mhlophe is an author, a poet, playwright, director, performer, and storyteller. She was influenced by her grandmother's tales when she was a child. She's written, and her written and performance talent has transported her from South Africa to South and North America to Europe, Greenland, and Japan. So very lucky to have you with us today. And we also have Mr. Shadrack Mkansi with us. He's the manager of SAASTA, which is the South African Agency for Science and Technology Advancement. Thank you, everyone, for being here and for joining us. There's so much that Mike has put down. I think one of the key things that really stood out was the arts as agents for change. And I think we really are in a time right now when we see that with COVID and with the psychosocial and environmental issues that are all kind of rupturing at the seams in this current time. I think we had a conversation just before we joined all of you live, and I overheard Dr. Mhlophe telling Heather about how she had taken on a technology and transformed the way that she reaches audiences with her storytelling. And I think it's really a beautiful example of the arts incorporating technology. And Dr. Mhlophe, could you tell us a little bit about your stories and how you've managed to get them to young people in this time when we're finding it quite hard to connect with our audiences? I think you're muted. Could you just check your settings?
Thank you. I just want to say a big thank you to Prof for his presentation, and you know, going on the journey with you was lovely, and the images and the places you took us to. I'm very grateful for that, and also mentioning an amazing human being like Nicholas Ellenborg. I've got great respect for artists like him. And also, when you talk about how art is ever evolving, ever changing, and the same applies to science. And when you are not in that full-time science space, you feel like it's a foreign language. It's one of those terrifying water to even put your little toe into. But when you get to know people who are working in that space, and you know, you look at the common possibilities and synergies, you know that we are fellow travelers in this world, and I'm very, very grateful for that. And one of the things that I always remember in the work that I'm doing, we were told from a very young age, you must tread with a sense of dignity on the land of our forefathers. Having your sense of self-respect and respecting other people you come into contact with. I think it felt like a prophecy for me that my own father could say that if you respect yourself, respect people you come into contact with, you'll be all right in the world. He did not mean a little bit of KZN or a little bit of South Africa. It was the bigger world out there. Nobody even knew how much of the world I was going to see. And then comes a time like the year 2020 with COVID-19, and we're supposed to stay home, wash our hands, sanitize, be still. And I'm good with putting my passport in my drawer. I'm chilled with that. 35 years of zigzagging the world, I've been very, very blessed. But look at the way we are able to use these platforms, like these Zoom platforms where we're connecting with one another in different spaces. I've been telling stories and recording them and putting them online with different sister organizations. And they've reached so many people, and I didn't have to go to a theater to be on a stage, to be at a particular venue. I could be here at home and find a quiet space and record the stories. And the stories could be not only shared by that organization, many people who looked at those stories and then they let other people know, listen, there are stories happening in that place. And I started doing them also in isiZulu, because you can tell them in English, and people who understand you in English, yes, they can reach you. But how about people who speak your mother tongue? And give me great joy when I'm able to do that. And these platforms don't mind what language you use. And now 2021, we've started sharing the stories again to give them to friends and colleagues and many, many people we know who are parents, who are thinking, I've run out of stories. The children are at home too much. What am I going to do? I've read them, all the books I've got. I'm losing my mind. Don't worry. Send you a story. There we go. After supper, here's your dessert. Story time.
Yes, I believe you were using WhatsApp, which is fantastic. We had our National Arts Festival in 2020 in an online format, and one of the very successful theatre pieces was done on WhatsApp as well. I know you want to get to
WhatsApp and Facebook have been very, very helpful.
Yes, totally. Mike, you had something to say.
Yes, I'd just like to say that I'd love to share the story of another famous storyteller with you, Dr. Mhlophe, and that is Marjorie Courtney Latimer, the pioneering first director of the East London Museum. Yeah. She was a storyteller throughout her life and had a very good knowledge of not only natural history, but also cultural history. And I've recently written a biography of her, and I'd like to send you a copy with my compliments. So you can sort of see what she's done.
I'd be very happy. Thank you very much. We can also do an official launch of that book when we celebrate our 20 years of Nozincwadi literacy campaign on World Book Day here in Durban. So we can do an official launch. Thank you, sir. And the recycling that's taking place, I'll come back to that. Let's give other people an opportunity to speak.
I'm curious to just chat with Heather. Heather, you were supposed to join us at the National Arts Festival last year when we were live, and then things got a bit derailed. So it's great to see you again after all this time. This question about arts reaching out. I'm curious about some of your audiences and some of the questions they may have asked you, because you've toured quite extensively. And I think also to diverse audience, to younger ones, people interested in the sciences, people interested in the arts. What are some of can you share with us one or two of the most interesting questions that you've received about your piece, and also maybe just a little background about the work for those who don't know?
Yes, so goodness, the show is about the actress and inventor Hedy Lamarr, originally from Vienna, Austria, and then she went to Hollywood, became a famous film star and in Hollywood, and was known as the most beautiful woman in the world. So people didn't recognize that she was a genius because they just got stopped at her face and how beautiful she was. But during World War II, she wanted to do something to support her new country and the Allied forces. And she had knowledge of munitions because she had been married to an Austrian arms dealer. And she took that knowledge to make a communication system for torpedoes, to improve it, to make it jam-proof. And we use that communication system now in cell phones, Wi-Fi, GPS, Bluetooth, all of these things. So I use her story in order to inspire audiences to pursue their passions and find ways to make the world a better place, especially to encourage young women in science and technology, and to establish Hedy Lamarr as a role model for intelligence, ingenuity, and invention. And yes, I take it all over the world. It's amazing how this story is compelling for all ages, really. For the show, I say 12 to 100 plus. Because everyone's using wireless technology. It's a story of a strong woman, and it combines art and science. And I was even able to go into some primary schools in KwaZulu-Natal and do presentations and have discussions. Those were some of the best days of my life, to be honest. So even the younger ones, and I think that's the first time anything from Hedy Lamarr has been translated into Zulu. So that was really wonderful. Yeah. So the SOD, he was saying along for the little ones to make sure that they understood. So in terms of questions, I think people are just really intrigued as to why I chose Hedy. That's the question I get across the board. And that really comes from the fact that science and art are in me. And they're not different things. I started in astrophysics, as you heard, at University of Virginia, and then I started taking acting classes. I wanted to be an astronaut, but then I became an actor. And people think those are very different, but the way I explain it in terms of those professions is being an astronaut and being an actor both involve a transcendence of normal existence. And that art and science are seeking to answer the same questions. Who are we? Why are we here? Are we alone? Is someone else there? And we might be coming at it from a different vantage point, but really we're seeking to answer the same question. And we really need both sides of our brain in order to do that. To answer any scientific question or come up with theories as to why things are the way they are, you have to use your imagination. And any problem really can benefit from using both sides of your brain. And so once I became an actor, I sort of put my passion for science away. And once I realized that that wasn't true to myself and brought in and married it with my love of art to create this piece, then everything makes sense. And I have a mission, and I can bring her story around the world, and especially encourage young women in science and technology, which is my passion.
Yeah, I do find your story, your personal story, and Hedy's story very inspiring. And I think it's like what Mike, what you were saying earlier, that good scientists must also be good dreamers. And this idea of kind of the left brain and the right brain working together, and the importance of both, is of course something that I think is particularly important in education, as we are considering and shaping and guiding our the future minds. I want to just maybe pull in Shadrack at this moment. You're a science awareness platforms manager at SAASTA and a former maths and computer science educator and part-time lecturer at UNISA. And you've worked at the Gcina Science Center and now manage the Science Center support projects at SAASTA. Could you maybe tell us a little bit more about what platforms we have available to exhibit art in the science, the schools, science centers, festivals, this kind of area? Is there a way that we are looking at getting arts into science spaces in education?
Oh yeah, no, good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to be able to share the sciences part in the arts. And Mike, thank you very much for the presentation. I saw a lot of course, we always lose you. When you go into arts, you really get into arts, and we even forget you are a scientist. But yes, that demonstrates how science relates to arts, and how the arts can be used to communicate the science. I believe we have all been to school. You know what happens with the learners that are struggling with maths and science, to the point where they actually feel like science and maths are just difficult. And we have to find ways of making maths and science easy. And I think from the beginning, you know, when you were learning the A, B, C, D, E, it happens in the classroom. The first platform is in the classroom, and you use music, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and all those things, and then you are learning, but you are busy singing. And I remember when I was in grade 11, I met a science teacher who was teaching us the elements of the periodic table, and using a song to teach us the elements of the periodic table. H, Hedy, baby, Sino, Except Clark, and all, and then you've got the first 20 in less than 10 seconds. You've got the first 20 elements of the periodic table in your head, and they are a song. But when you write it down, then you know them, and you know H is number 1, H is number 2, and so on. So you use a song and you are learning. And what I was seeing in the presentation that Mike was doing is the use of color.
Is it just me who is experiencing Shadrack's?
In all kinds of science communication platforms. I got a feedback here that my internet connection is buffering. Are you able to hear me now, Rucera?
Yes, as it goes Murphy's Law, when you tell us this, then we can hear you. But we missed your immediate point before. But I think we have you back now. Do you want to continue?
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. Yeah. So I've worked with Mike in the development of exhibits, and the development of exhibits and where exhibits are used to communicate science. You have to put together something which is very interesting, which I also went with Hedy, and she came to South Africa to do some presentation in a number of our platforms, science centers, in the science festivals, and with the science. I don't know what's happening.
Oops.
Can continue, Shadrack. Your video is just off because of your internet.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thanks, Ryan.
So yeah, So we have got science centers where we've got, which are the platforms where we place lots of exhibits. But you know, you can just place exhibits with one color, and you can bring colors to make it more interesting, more attractive, and make learners, especially the young ones, want to go to that particular exhibit. While they are playing with the exhibits, they learn science. They learn science.
Maybe I'll just, I have a question that's come in from Facebook. It is Fundiswa. Brian,
what was done in the
should we maybe switch off our videos and let Mike be the only one? Or let him, okay, Shadrack, be the only one with his video?
Let's see if Ryan can maybe just have a chat with him in the background and come up with something. I'll maybe ask a question in the meantime. Dr. Mhlophe, it'd be great to have you back on screen. And then Ryan is one of our trusted technical geniuses in the back end. He works for the National Arts Festival. So I'll trust Ryan to just be in contact and drop me a chat if you need me to do something. I want to just put a question that's come from Facebook, but from Fundiswa, and it connects to this. I think what Shadrack was speaking about, a kind of, let's say, playfulness in the sciences, which is something I've always thought about in terms of how we teach science. So Fundiswa says, my deepest concern is that the two, I think she means science and art, are taken as two directly opposite fields, with science taken as a very serious subject and art just as a field of play, and sometimes might not be considered as true as science relies on, as true, because science relies on facts and evidence. And I think this maybe is a question around our approach to teaching the sciences and how we frame them in education, but also as parents and in our family homes. I wonder if any of you want to kind of respond to that, or if you've have experience or ideas around playfulness in the arts, or this idea that Fundiswa was bringing about, playfulness in teaching the sciences, and this idea about science getting kind of more weight or being more serious. Dr. Mhlophe, did you want to, or why don't you can raise your hand if whoever wants, okay.
Thank you very much. It's very, very important to raise that point, because governments and many important institutions will look at science. Mathematics are very, very serious, weighty subjects. And then when you do the arts, they even come up with soft skills. But who came up with that? So I'm grateful that we are discussing these, because we need both. We need both science and mathematics. We need the creative arts. And a nation or a world without the creative arts will soon perish, really, really. And science, we need science as much, because we need to advance in different places. And that hard evidence is wonderful, and it can be able to be brightened, and a light can shine on those supposed hard evidences or facts, research, with the creative arts as partners. And so I don't see the need to choose one or the other and say the other one is not as important. Here in KZN, when I talk about my love for astronomy, people are like, what? Astronomy, why? What's that? And so often I wish more people would come and talk more about astronomy, so that I'm not this lone species who loves stars and the stratosphere out there. And so I want to talk about the way when you feel passion for something. You know, people who love cars. I don't know if you know anybody in your friend circle or in your family, people who love cars. They can talk about cars until the sun rises and sets again. So whatever subject you have a passion for, if it's science, deliver it with the same passion to your students, and they're going to be coming with you. And the same thing with mathematics. Doesn't matter what subject you want to teach, inject it with an element of fun, with a passion, with the feeling that you have that I can't live without science. I can't live without mathematics, or I can't live without the creative arts. Imagine if there was no music in the world. Just imagine that. We have all the science and people do all the research and everything, and there's no music. Let's talk about this thing that is more accessible to everybody around the world in whatever language. Imagine without that, the same I feel for science and mathematics. We can't do without.
Yes. Heather, you're hot on the heels there. That was impassioned, Dr. Mhlophe. Thank you.
I love that. I love that. And I have so many things to say, but I'll start with when I was in South Africa performing, and Shadrack and I went by the US Embassy to talk to them. And he shared how important he thought my work was because of the storytelling element to it, and how important storytelling is in the culture, and that combining that with science education was really important. And that meant a lot to me that he explained it that way. And I'll say that also it was important when I was at Sibono Discovery Center, and Dr. Chikane would come in and he would introduce the show to the secondary school audiences, and he was very passionate about it and explaining to them that this was really something special, because it wasn't just using science to communicate science, is using art as well in a new way. And I will say that when you ask about questions, Rucera, that the discussions with the secondary school students there were so rich, and the learners were so smart and had such wonderful things to say, and also about gender dynamics in the sciences, which was really wonderful. And so through the work in terms of passion, Doctor, I encourage the learners and any audiences to really think about what they're most passionate about, and to really focus on those things and find ways to spend their lives working on those things, because that's where they're going to do the best work and make their best contribution to their country. And to not think about messages they may have gotten about gender, or about, oh, you can't do science, you're a girl, or you can't do art, you're not creative, but to really focus on those passions, whatever they are. And in this package where we're talking about both of them, it's also wonderful to say to them, you might love this one thing that is science, and this one thing that is art, and this other thing that you think doesn't fit with them, but you might be able to combine those three things and do something with your life that no one else in the world could ever have done. And the only reason that it exists is because it came from you. And I love those discussions, and maybe being able to put a light bulb in a young person's head to, oh, maybe I could do these two things together and create something new.
Yeah, I have this memory of from last year, February, when I was speaking to students who were at our Schools Fest. It was the last live event we managed to do last year. And there is something about young people's kind of depth of engagement and really presence when participating in something or watching something, if they are engaged, that is very inspiring. So I could hear that and feel that in the experiences you were sharing. Mike, I want to just come to you. I think that we have artists and scientists likely in our audience, and I wonder, from the examples that you presented, but also your work previously and your research with artists across the continent, are there any examples that you could draw on for those artists for science listening in, which reflect maybe an exciting working model of collaborations between the arts and sciences, for those who are kind of playing with this idea?
Sure, perhaps before I answer that, I could just sort of make my comment on the discussion. To me, science and art and the professional practice of them are equally serious. As someone who played the triangle, or at most the penny whistle in the school orchestra, I'm totally in awe of highly competent violinists and conductors of orchestras. I mean, they are doing serious business, just as serious as anything that a scientist does. But what we need to remember when we're communicating science or we're communicating art to people who aren't as technically skilled or who are younger, that's when it's important that we should be more playful and do it in a more cross-disciplinary way. So, you know, the practice of both of those disciplines is serious, but the communication of them to non-professional audiences needs to be much more playful. And one binary that worries me a little bit is all the top scientists that I've been privileged to know have been very cultured people who are avid supporters and enthusiasts about the arts. But I don't necessarily find that in the other direction. I think that most top artists in all the different fields do have a good appreciation of science. But I also find that some arts people they somehow feel it reinforces their character by saying they are uninterested in science, almost bragging about their lack of interest and knowledge of science as if that's a positive attribute. And that worries me a little bit. But in terms of an example of collaboration between artists and scientists, well, the best one that I've been involved in is my collaboration with Nicholas Ellenborg, because he is an artist with a keen interest in science. And whenever he's gone into producing a play on a particular aspect of science, he's always done his homework. And he's mainly done that by meeting with the scientists, talking directly with them, often going out into the field with them when they're doing research or in the laboratory, and really not only finding out about, but understanding the science that they're doing so that he can convey that understanding in his plays. Because it's not enough to just convey information. We've got to convey understanding and wisdom in order for it to be really meaningful. So I would say Theatre for Africa is a very good example of that excellent collaboration between artists and scientists.
Mm-hmm. I think what I really appreciate hearing from those of you who have answered is this sense of kind of advocacy for the arts and for the place of the arts coming from the sciences, which I think is really important. It reminds me a bit of, I know, Heather, you were also speaking about gender issues or gender inequalities in the sciences. I know there's been movements recently about men speaking out about gender-based violence, for example, particularly in South Africa. And I think this is really, really important. So also hats off to SciFest Africa for pulling together this webinar and this topic. I want to just stay with education and come back to you, Shadrack. I believe you have shifted your connection, so hopefully we can stay with you for your full answer this time. Could you tell us a bit more about what exists to support collaboration between the arts and sciences in South Africa, maybe policies or frameworks or structures? I know we have Sonia Rademeier, who is also an avid NAF supporter and an artist, who's asked a similar question. I think she's also keen to consider these kind of collaborations.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Yeah, in fact, from policy perspectives, in 1996, when the first science and technology policy was passed by government, it was within 4 areas, and those 4 areas included arts and science. So it was the Department of Arts, Science, Culture and Technology. So it was culture, technology, science, and arts. So you see how serious our government was to put together science and arts. So, and currently, later in 1998, the NRF Act didn't have the humanities, the arts, and the science into youth strategy didn't have the arts per se. But when we came to the science engagement strategy, when we came to the latest Amendment Act of the National Research Foundation, where science engagement is implemented from. They've included humanities, human and social sciences, because how do you communicate the science without bringing people together? We were hit hard by COVID-19 lockdowns from last year. Why? Because the platforms that we use to edutain the public, to meet with the public, to make science meet with the society, were closed, and it includes SciFest Africa. We couldn't go to a festival because we couldn't use that platform to bring people together due to COVID-19. And that tells you something. Is meeting together, bringing science and the society together is very important. And policy has been passed to do that. And as you know, SciFest has been supported by government for a very long time. Why? Because you are doing science, but you are doing science within humanities, where you are bringing people together to interact with each other. But how you communicate science as well, you use exhibits, you use drama, you use storytelling, you use and all these are science, are arts, which you use to communicate the science. And I think when we were playing soccer, when you watch soccer these days, you will see a lot of mathematics, statistics, how many passes were made, how many, but you are actually engaged in an artistic work, because you are dribbling, you are doing, and you have to be a very good artist of working with the ball, you know, to be a good soccer player. But we are engaged in a mathematical activity where we want to know how many passes you have made, how many offside you have made, how many scores you have made, how many you know, all these things. And science is happening, but you are engaged in a different activity altogether.
Yes, please, Mike. Mike, I think you've muted yourself. You unmuted and muted.
Yeah,
there we go.
I think South Africa has a very proud record of bringing art and science together. In 1998, a year of science and technology was declared by the then Department of Arts, Culture, Science and Technology. And I think we were one of the first countries in the world to have a Department of Arts, Culture, Science and Technology, and also one of the first to dedicate an entire year to science. And I think, you know, when one looks around South Africa and we look at the way in which traditional African ways of communicating through song, dance, music and storytelling, how powerfully we've developed those traditional methods of communication. And I think it's something we need to be proud of, and you know, we need to build on that strong foundation and share our experience in that regard with other African countries.
Go ahead, Heather.
Yes, I was just going to point out that I think it's so wonderful that SciFest and National Arts Festival, that your teams work together as one. I think that's a very incredibly special thing, and one of the examples of how South Africa is bringing those two aspects together. And I want to say something else on the play versus serious thing in terms of art versus science, that I think so to play as an artist, as an actor, in order to succeed at that and feed yourself, you have to be very serious as well. And you have to, and it takes dedication and repetition and practice, and a lot of the skills I had from studying the sciences have helped me in the arts. And then also that if in the sciences, I believe also, if you have that passion and you're using both sides of your brain to figure out scientific concepts, that it is also joyful and playful, even though it's considered a more academic activity, a more serious activity, as it were. But if you can find the play in the science and the serious dedication in the arts, those things play off each other as well.
Is it if I remember correctly, you also, Heather, you also do kind of talks around the production and setting up tours and this kind of, yeah, I'm sure the response to that is also quite positive.
Yeah, I love the outreach, the community engagement. I go into classes, as I've said. I have question and answer sessions after all my performances if I can, depending on the format. And I like to do panel discussions of women in STEM fields to discuss their triumphs and challenges in their fields and how we can support, how we can better support young women coming up in their field, in their scientific and technological fields. I, yes, do lectures as well, master classes in performance and creating your own work, and workshops as well, and improvisation and such. So those are things that I love to do. I love to become a part of each community and learn, get to know the community and try to contribute beyond just the performance.
Let's go to Dr. Mhlophe, and then Mike, I see that you also raised your hand.
Thank you so much. I'd like to talk about the way we look at things like aviation. Now, I don't know how they keep that aeroplane up in the sky. So big, so many people, and the luggage, and everything, and it's flying for hours and hours, crossing oceans, and it gets on the other side. And I wake up in the morning, I'm in Stockholm, hello? that's magic, really, that is magic. You look at all of the different things that are being done. When you look at something like an aeroplane, that you just use it. I'm gonna go to Joburg for the meeting in the morning, and then no, I'll be back by 6 p.m. I'll be back, don't worry. I'm back home and I'm doing supper. And so there are just certain things that we've come to take for granted, how we use them on a daily basis. And they took forever to be invented. I want to talk about invention. Invention is the creative arts on their own, and those are the people who just don't give up. And so whatever it is that people want to invent, it is something that we should be in awe of, in the same way that people look at somebody who's an outstanding opera singer. I don't know how they breathe like that. Honestly, I'm amazed. Yes, I can sing a little bit, but when you look at people who can do this thing, that's a science of its own. So there are different types of science. And what we have to do is look at how we encourage one another to learn about each other's areas of specialization. I've been talking, when I speak to teachers, I sometimes remind teachers about some of the amazing teachers I've come into contact with. Some of my favorite teachers, one of my favorite teachers is a teacher who taught me Latin at school. And then we have got a teacher I met when I arrived in Johannesburg in 1980, Babu Tamsang Kambule. I don't know if you know that man. That was a heavyweight. He loved mathematics, totally loved mathematics. And matric students you would gather at Wits University. He wanted to share that information. It's like, it was a matter of life and death to share information, that thing called mathematics, until students come out of there and then they write their mathematics papers and they pass. Hello, Kambule is in charge. Kambule has been in the house. And nowadays you never hear his name being mentioned. And so we need to find ways of cross-pollinating and honoring and being in awe of one another's areas of specialization. And so if SciFest can be that platform, that kitchen that cooks this cross-pollination, we're in business. There can be more of that. So thank you for inviting me to be part of these platforms.
It's always a pleasure. I think, Mike, I'll come to you. I just want to pull out this idea that you said about your maths teacher. And I mean, we're talking about igniting the imagination and inspiring students, but I think this is also very important to do the same with our teachers, because you know, when we inspire and we ignite and we support also with this kind of material and engagement, they can pass it on to their students. Mike, you had something to add?
Yes, firstly, if I could say, I think, Dr. Mhlophe, what excites me about your approach is that you've retained a childlike curiosity and inquisitiveness about things.
Yeah.
I also sit in an aeroplane and look out the window and wonder, how does this darn thing fly? And I mean, it is magic, and it's something we need to remember.
Yeah.
But I'd like to ask Heather, do members of your audience ever think that you are Hedy Lamarr?
The younger ones, perhaps. People do call me Hedy quite a lot, but my name is Heather, so it sounds that happens whenever you're playing a role. You get called the name of the character. Not so much. I think that may become an issue when I start my next play. Eventually I'll get to writing it. Is about Sally Ride, America's First Woman in Space. Flying with Sally Ride, America's First Woman in Space is the show, is the title. So showing up as, you know, in my jumpsuit as Sally Ride, I think that might happen quite a bit. That people, especially the young ones, might think that I'm actually her. So I have to say Heather Massey playing. actress Heather Massey playing.
I've had a wonderful experience working with an actor, David Muller, whose stage name is a Merry Scholar. We've done 10 different science theatre productions together, the most successful of which was called Imagining Einstein, which has traveled throughout South Africa and been performed to over 100,000 people. And he often is mistaken with his young audience, think he is Einstein.
Right.
And to him as such.
Right. The older people would know that Hedy and Einstein aren't alive anymore.
But what David does is at the end of the performance, he sits on the front of the stage and chats to the audience. They think he's Einstein and he stays in character. So he acts as if he's Einstein, and he only knows things up until he died. He doesn't know anything beyond that. And that leads to interesting discussions. So it was a fascinating experience.
Yeah. That might be something for me to consider. My talkbacks I always do as myself. I come out of character for those so that I can answer anything. But it might be interesting to see what would happen if I tried that.
Yeah, I know.
David Miller used to stay in character in other circumstances as well. You know, he'd give a performance, say, at a Sci-Fest or a Sasol Sci-Fest event, and then stay in character as Einstein for the rest of the evening. And it was great fun because every conversation he had was, you know, furthered the educational role that he was playing.
Yeah, so that's combining all the things we're talking about, all the things together, which is great fun. And that's what I love about doing the show, because it's the most important relationship in my show is Hedy's relationship with the audience. I played 35 other characters, but getting to look in the eyes of the audience, and young ones and older audience members, and have those special moments together is so enriching for me. and from the reaction I get also from them. So getting to meet Einstein, what an opportunity.
Yeah.
You know, for instance, if an audience member asks you, thinking that you're Hedy Lamarr, what was it like to have a male-dominated society turn their back on you and your science? You know, for you to answer in character, I think would be quite meaningful.
Right. I get your point.
I called you Hedy, I think, with the first or a few times.
All the time. I'm not doing that ever.
Yeah, I think either a lot of people in the presentations that you have done in my presence, they actually thought you are the actual character that you're talking about.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you're there, and you could you're in the audience.
You remember I came with my son.
Right.
So they actually thought you are the character.
He did. Oh. Oh, he was
that's how convincing you were. And you continue to be, and why not?
At 105, right? Looking pretty good.
There you go, and you've lived long, young lady.
Well, it's a joy, and yes, for the younger ones especially, who would have no idea who she was,
Yay.
might think that but you know, I do address that I was born in 1914 as Hedy, so if they would do the math, they would realize that I look quite young for that age. But
I have a question that's come in from Monica, which I'll open to all of you, and also just to say we're as I thought, time's kind of flown and we're heading towards the end. So maybe also give a think about something that you maybe want to kind of pose or close on as we approach the end. So Monica says, thank you for this great topic and discussion. Dr. Mhlophe was joined by Dr. Kerry Sink at a SciFest webinar a few months ago, which introduced the idea of scientists as explorers. I found the notion really evocative and wondered if the panel had some ideas on how we can allow and teach everyone to be explorers in their own world. Dr. Mhlophe, do you want to pick up on that first?
Yeah, it was a very wonderful discussion indeed. And for me, I'm forever hungry for knowledge. And in isiZulu, we say, umuntu ufunda aze afe, a person learns until they die. If I stop wanting knowledge, I think I would want to jump off the train. Because if I don't want to learn anything anymore, if I do not want to explore anymore, I don't know what am I doing here. So it is extremely important then for us in whatever professions we are in to continuously explore and look at different ways we can make things better, where we can graduate to the next level and then the next level. And sometimes you get invited to work with a certain group of people, and then you agree because you think you're experienced, you got this. And you arrive there, you think, no, not quite. And then you have to wake up very, very fast and see how you're going to do this. And I'm glad that a few times I've been thrown into the deep and I've had to learn to swim quite fast. And one of those experiences was doing Africa 95 in London in 1995. I agreed for one reason. And when I arrived in London, it was something else. And I panicked. I had a stomach ache for 3 days. I could hardly sleep at night. And my friend Janet, whose house I stayed in, she didn't know what to do with me. I wasn't hungry. I was a mess. I was a mess. I was thinking, what did I agree to do this thing for? And then by the 4th day, I had to face the audience. I had to take the whole audience through the Africa 95 exhibition, which is from Cape to Cairo. And these are different types of art from all of these countries, many of which I've never been to. Many of the pieces I've never even heard they existed. And so I had to make up my mind, what song am I going to write about that? What poem? What story? I had to make up a new show until on the 5th day, I'm doing a 45-minute performance every single day, taking my audience, being the guide to the exhibition. It was one of the most terrifying things I ever agreed to do. At the same time, I learned so much. If I had been invited as a guest, I would have sort of wafted through, oh, that's nice. I wonder what's that? It's from where? Oh, the DRC, interesting. What's that? Oh, Somalia, wow. I didn't know they had that. I would be just going through as any other person. And because now I had agreed, thinking I'm super clever, to do this thing, after the 3 days of terrifying no sleep and no eating, with my stomach going into knots, I woke up to the place where I said, I've got to do this. I'm not just here in order to see the exhibition. I've got to interpret it my own way and tell stories and songs and poems. And many people are forced to do that. Sometimes you arrive at a place, you think you're coming to do this, and you end up having to do something else. And I'm sure many scientists deal with that. Many people, whether it's in mathematics or whatever, they've got to deal with that. That's a reality. Or people in sport, they play in climates and spaces or altitudes they never even played in before. And that's the way life is. And we never stop learning. We never stop growing. And I'm grateful for that.
Yes, Heather.
Thank you, Doctor, for that. I love your passion. I just want, I just want to spend time with you. I want to hear you. I want to hear you tell the story to explain the magic of the airplane taking off. I want to hear that story from you.
We're going to just take you back to KZN, and you're going to have to come back to KZN.
I will. I'm longing to come back.
I like that.
Yes, I'm longing to come back. So, I would say that this discussion is so important, especially right now in what we're going through. It's so important to consider both art and science, because the importance of science right now is so huge to every aspect of our lives. It's science that's going to allow us to be in a room together again. It's science that's going to allow our activities to happen again. And the light has been put on that. A light has been put on that with vaccines and the scientific studies, but also I think everyone is feeling so much how we're all missing the arts, and how the arts are what is going to help us heal from what we've gone through. And the arts are going to be what help us to feel alive again after this experience. So thank you for this discussion. And I know it will be ever so much more sweet when I get to, whenever it is that I get to be there in person for SciFest, and hopefully sometime for National Arts Festival in person as well. It will just, because of the time we've gone through, as much as we valued those experiences in the past, we've had this experience to show us what it's like to not have that, and how wonderful it's going to be when we get back to that. And it's science that's going to bring us back to being in person for the arts. Thanks.
Yeah, that was very beautiful, Heather. Thank you. Shadrack, you want to say something?
Yeah, no, I just want to say something before we end the sessions. We, through government funding, we have created spaces or platforms where these kind of discussions are taking place with scientists who are called science communicators. We've got about 40 science centers in South Africa. We've got science centers in all provinces now. There's no province without a science center. And those are the spaces that have been created and supported by government for people to go and interact with scientists in those particular spaces. I think depending on where you are, you'll find a science center somewhere close by. But we also have a celebration that Mike spoke about when he said in 1998, South Africa embarked on a celebration of science and technology. So we've got an annual science and technology celebration called National Science Week. It goes to all municipalities, all 52 municipalities. We partner with different science communicators, scientists, and all people who have got passion in communicating science to go to different areas and communicate science during that period of the National Science Week. It's currently somewhere on the last week of July, the first week of August. We are, even now, as I'm talking, planning to have this celebration happening in the first week of August this year. So we'll have activities taking place in malls, in science centers, in schools as well, and science councils, science research facilities, and universities. So you will have many spaces where science will be communicated. And this is supported by government. And I think it includes the space where we are today, which is SciFest Africa.
That's really great to hear. And I think that you can certainly approach National Arts Festival to see how we can bring the arts into those spaces and how science can continue to advocate for the arts and this shared approach of exploring and dreaming. Mike, you had something that you wanted to add?
Yes, well, firstly, I'm also looking forward to learning from Dr. Mhlophe how aeroplanes fly, because I'm as mystified as you are. And just to comment on something you said, I think it is Einstein who said that we don't stop playing because we grow old. We grow old because we stop playing. And I think the same can be said for learning. It's very much a similar phenomenon. And to me, what's so important in bringing the arts and the sciences together is that we need to use every opportunity to educate one another about our different fields. I remember a dinner I was once invited to of people from all different disciplines, and each of us was asked to bring to the table some activity which told the others about what we do. And I brought along a whole lot of tabletop experiments, which I did with cups and saucers and knives and forks, and everyone had a great deal of fun. And PJ Powers was there, and she did a remarkable thing. She composed a song on the spot at the table, and this song was about all the things that we'd done, including my tabletop experiments. And it was a really catchy song that she had composed on the spot. And it was so wonderful to see how the different talents of people, you know, can be used in that way. And then just to comment on Monica's question, I think it is very, very important that we encourage young people to be explorers. And, you know, they don't have to be explorers in remote areas. They can be explorers in their own back gardens or in the intertidal zone on the edge of the ocean or on a lake or river edge or up a tree. You know, if you get down your hands and knees or crawl around on your belly, they're wonderful things to see. And that to me is the most exciting thing, is to nurture that sense of curiosity and keep it alive in children and also in adults. That is the most important thing we can do, in my opinion.
Thank you, Mike. There's so many words that really keep popping out from everything that's come up. Of course, explore and playfulness and dream and imagine, invent. So I think there's this is really a kind of a dominant sense that's arising from this. And with these words floating around, there's no question around the relationship between the sciences and the arts. For me, I think if everyone is happy to kind of we can do a last round and a kind of closing comment. I want to just kind of pin to the wall, let's say, as we go into the closing comments, something that Mike, you said in your opening presentation, where you were saying that we really need the arts and the sciences together at this point in time, particularly. Also reflecting, Heather, on what you were talking about with COVID and the absence of the arts and how we're all feeling that. And Mike, you were speaking about a collective intelligence and emotion. And I feel it's interesting. We're all so far away, and so we don't have the possibility to share in real life as we have before. But at the same time, we have I don't know, you know, we've all done so many more webinars, and we're really connecting at a faster pace and almost further. So it's almost in a way that there's a ground for this collective intelligence, and really kind of rooting in this emotion that you were speaking about. So we're hitting the end of our time, and I hope that everyone in our audience has been enthralled as I have, and it's really great to see the questions coming in. We can go around and just do a final closing, and then bid everyone good night. So Heather, are you up for leading us?
Yes, I wanted to say, based on what you just said, I know I was focusing on us getting back in person, but I do want to acknowledge how happy and joyful I have been being with all of you, so many people that I love deeply, and my cheeks hurt from smiling so much. So we're able to join our hearts, even though we're not able to join in the same space. And thank you ever so much for this time together.
Thank you. It's always lovely to hear you, and I look forward to seeing your work. And your next, what is the name of the work that you're developing?
To be called Flying with Sally Ride, America's First Woman in Space.
Looking forward to it. Shadrack, did you want to just give us a little closing word?
Yeah, let me just say that maybe I'm coming from SAASTA, which is the South African Agency for Science and Technology Advancement. And we are we are within the National Research Foundation, and we're the business unit or a unit of the Department of Science and Innovation. It used to be Science and Technology, it's now Science and Innovation. The word innovation, it brings in a lot of the arts in it, because it talks about creativity. And when we talk of science now, we're talking of science from the development of it, and from the youngest age to the oldest age. So as Mike was saying, you get old because you stop playing. You don't stop playing because you are old. So that's what the department is trying to create. People who can continue to play within the space of learning.
Thank you for that, Shadrack. Innovation is more central. Absolutely. Mike, did you want to give us a little closing word? I think you're muted as well. Oh.
I'd like to share with you a good example of art, science, and technology all coming together. It's a 3D printed model of a coelacanth, very accurate, made by a neighbor of mine whose hobby is 3D printing. And it was given to me as a present for thanking me for helping their young sons with their interest in science and technology. My concluding comment is, and I'm focusing here on our own Science and Art Festival in Grahamstown, I think we've set a great example to the rest of the continent and the rest of the world on bringing art and science together. But let's try and have even more science in our Arts Festival and even more art in our Science Festival. And in particular, let's try to invite as many creatives from elsewhere in Africa, in both the science and arts fields, to participate in our national festivals. Because the research that I've done for my two recent books, one of them is Harambee, The Spirit of Innovation in Africa, and the other one is called Curious Notions. I've identified phenomenal people around the continent who would love to participate and contribute to our festivals, and we would benefit greatly from their participation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Please go ahead, Dr. Mhlophe.
Thank you so much. What a privilege to have been with each and every one of you. Thank you for inviting me. This year, being 2021, we are hoping to put together a show called Waves and Tales, working with talking about rivers and oceans and what happens under this great big thing called the ocean, and also looking at stories and poems and songs and drumming and all of that can come together to re-educate, reignite the for this very scarce resource called water. Because many people pretend as if we don't live in a water scarce country, and we do. And so I'm hoping that by sharing this show, we're going to work with Ushaka Marine World. But after that, we'd like to take it into different places. And hopefully many people, young and old, will fall in love with respecting rivers and not throwing away horrible things into rivers, because the veins in our bodies that transport the blood to everywhere, to the heart, to the mind, to every little corner of our bodies. And the same thing must be said also about education being made fun whether we are educating communities about this terrifying dude called COVID in Dodembe, whether we are talking about the vaccine, which we know very little about, but we say, give me. So much knowledge needed, and science has gone into whoever has been working on whatever vaccine people are getting in different world, and hopefully we shall get here in South Africa. So there's so much learning to be done and so much growing to be done. And thank you, SciFest. And I'm hoping platforms, and one of these days we'll meet in person, and I'll be most happy indeed.
I look forward to that day too, and thank you for the provocation, Mike, to bring more arts into our Science Fest and more science into our Arts Fest. I think we're thinking along the same lines. Thank you everyone for being part of this. I'm looking forward to more, and to everyone who is listening on Facebook and joining us in Zoom. Keep an eye on SciFest Africa Facebook page so that you can keep in tune with what we have lined up. Take care, everyone. Have a beautiful evening.
Bye-bye.